Before the days of automated LED lights and computers, the Victorian railways had to find a way to signal their trains. And in comes two-position semaphore signaling. And in today's video, I'll be going through how this system works. Background. In Victoria, two-position signaling is widely used, but it's usually in the form of LED coloured lights, rather than mechanical arms. This mechanical arm is called a blade. However, mechanical signals are still in use by the railways, just not as prominently as they once were, as every couple of signals requires a signalman, so you can see why they were mostly replaced with coloured lights. Signals are placed far apart in regional areas, due to the same reason why they aren't mechanical anymore. You have to employ a signaller out of every block, the section between each signal box. Mechanical signals are also limited by, well, mechanics, limiting how far you can have the signals to the signal box, meaning you can't have a random signal 20 kilometers away from a signal box without a lot of ingenuity. In metro areas, unlike regional areas, signals are usually placed at the shortest distance possible to cram in more trains on the same line, and if you had to staff each signal box, this was an issue, until electronic signaling was rolled out, but wasn't too much of a problem in regional areas, as most regional lines aren't too heavily used. The way a block works, depending on the Safeworking, is when a train exits the last block, station or signal box, the next signal box is notified one way or another, and if the block in front is clear, the train is allowed through. An interlocking location is where signals are arranged so that conflicts can't occur, through crossings or junctions. It's a safety measure put in place so that points can't be changed unless both lines are clear from any trains. All points must always be set first before signals. Points must be locked and then the signals can be set. Without further ado, let's explain all the signals that were once used on the Victorian railways. Home signals. A home signal is most likely a signal you think of when someone tells you, picture a railway signal. Home signals appear when something needs to be protected, such as a level crossing, sidings, or points. All signals in this video show two aspects, and for home signals, they show stop with a horizontal arm and showing a red light, and proceed with the arm angled downwards 45 degrees and showing a green light. Home signals are red and have a white stripe going vertically down the side, unlike some other signals which will appear later. When a home signal shows stop, you must stop at it unless given permission to proceed. When your train is allowed to proceed, this is called a caution order. When a home signal is to proceed at an interlocked location, this means the home signal only applies to that specific track, and it tells the driver that the track is clear until the next signal. At non-interlocked locations, the signal at proceed only tells the driver that the points are set for movement. Of course, since signaling is critical for safety, if a driver chooses to pass the home signal without permission, they will be fined significantly. Starting and advancing signals. Once a train has entered the station or other controlled areas, they must leave through a signal called a starting signal, basically a glorified home signal. And I say this as they look exactly the same, with the same aspects as well. The starting signal also must always be at proceed to allow the train to exit the station. When it's at proceed, the signaller would use their choice of Safeworking to communicate with the next signal box whether the line is clear to send the train through or not. So, in short, the difference between home and starting signals are that starting signals let the train exit the station precinct, while home signals let the train enter the station precinct. When the starting signal is on a signal track, it's known as a home departure signal, and the signaller only sets it to proceed when the next block is clear. In later years of two-position signaling, the starting signal usually meant the first signal after a set of points, where the electric staff and ticket had concluded. Starting signals did not protect points, and only stations. Bracket signals. When tracks are taking diverging routes, mostly into sidings, oftentimes you'll see more than one home signal on a post, and sometimes even other signals. This signal is known as a bracket signal. and it's used in places where there are more than one track running through it. A bracket signal doesn't have any aspects of its own, and it's just an amalgamation of multiple signals, but usually you'll find two home signals. You can see a bracket signal is made up of a large pole which splits into two separate posts. These separate posts are called doles. Whichever side the dole is usually the track that it corresponds to. For instance, the left dole corresponds to the left track, and if that is at proceed, you'll be diverted left. And the right dole corresponds to the right track. If that is at proceed, you'll be diverted right. You can see this bracket signal here has different heights, and others don't, so why is this the case? Well, the height difference only really appears in home signals, and it's actually to help drivers to see if they need to slow down as they are going into siding or continuing onto a main line. The general rule is if the signal is lower, then you'll be diverted into a siding, but if it's higher, then you'll continue on the main line. Signals which are parallel usually don't require the driver to slow down, or know which line the train will be diverted to. These usually exist in places where there are two lines which become a single line, so all that really needs to be conveyed is which train is departing first. In two-position signaling, each line must have their own separate dole. However, there is one signal with an exception to that rule. Distant signals. Distant signals exist because trains need a lot of time and warning to stop, due to the basically no friction. And unlike cars, they can't stop immediately when they see red. A distant signal mirrors the position of a home signal, and is positioned a distant from the home signal. They show caution with the arm horizontal and the color yellow showing, which is the stand-in for red. Unlike home signals, you don't have to stop at a distant signal, and they are only a warning to tell you to slow down, nor do they protect anything. And the second aspect, proceed, with the arm lowered at 45 degrees and a green light showing, mirroring the home signal. Until the 1920s, distant signals had a wedged blade with red for caution instead of yellow. But after the 1920s, they were changed to be yellow and black with the wedge being kept, so now the driver has no trouble distinguishing between the two types. However, distant signals still could be red and white in specific situations, which I'll talk about later. Distant under home signals. It's later now, and this is the humble home over distant / starting over distant. This is a home signal with a distant signal under it. This happens when the spacing between signals is very close, and instead of the distant signal being the standard yellow and black, the distant signal reverts back to the pre-1920s signal. If both the home and distant signals are at stop and caution respectively, then the train must stop. If the home signal is at proceed, but the distant signal is at caution, then the train can proceed past the current signal, but must stop at the next signal. If both the home signal and distant signal are at proceed, then the train may proceed without worry. Interestingly, the home signal is controlled by the previous box, while the distant signal is controlled by the next box down. But a safety measure is put in place so that the distant signal can't show proceed, while the home signal is at stop. If the signaler sets the distant signal to proceed while the home signal is at stop, then the distant signal won't change to proceed unless the home signal is set to proceed. Coacting signals. Coacting signals in two-position signaling do the same job as they do in three-position signaling. Basically, is a signal which displays the same aspect as the signal it's replicating, but they're positioned in a way so they can be seen more clearly. Coactors can be both distant and home signals, but starting coactors are very uncommon. An example of a coactor is this bracket coactor at Ballarat, where the signals positioned on top of the cutting can be seen from much further back, but the coactors are placed lower and closer so that trains which have stopped in the signal can still see when they have to proceed, as the home signals will be barely in the driver's line of sight when stopped. There isn't a visible difference between the two signals, so drivers just have to know, but coactors usually have the same marker number as the signal they are reflecting, just with an added A or B, such as this one at Kilmore East. Calling on signals. At first glance, calling on signals are just a baby home signal. And while there are similarities, they are very different. A calling on signal is required in areas where shunting movements take place. They are found under home signals and only control the line they are under, or the line the home signal is linked to. When a home signal is at stop, if the calling on signal is at caution, it tells the shunter or driver the track is occupied. However, you can proceed with caution. Formerly, the signalman had to do this by hand using a green flag. They can also be found on single track main lines at extended crossing loops, where it was possible to fit 2 or more trains. Your train can enter the passing loop, but it's occupied, so you proceed with caution. Calling on signals show 2 aspects: normal, with the arm horizontal and no color light shown. The calling on signal will usually show normal when the home signal is at proceed, or when the driver cannot enter the occupied track. And caution, with the arm angled 45 degrees downwards, with a yellow light showing. A calling on signal will only ever show caution when the track up ahead is occupied, and it's safe for the driver to proceed. You can see a set of calling ons preserved at Ballarat. Calling ons are very similar to the low speed signals in free position color light signaling, and these are used regularly in Southern Cross. Although I don't believe there are any more calling on signals in operation today. Dwarf signals. A dwarf signal is a circular disc with a PNG image of a semaphore signal plastered on it. Not really. They aren't on a signal post, as they control movement between sidings and the main line, or when a train needs to shunt, so they are down low on the ground. Instead of having an arm which is levered up and down, it's a metal disc which is rotated. Most are mechanical using an arm, but newer ones were motor powered. Their aspects are the exact same as home signals, with one small difference. Stop is horizontal with a purple light showing, and proceed at 45 degrees with a green light showing. Purple would have been chosen in place of red, to not be mistaken with red hand signals in shunting yards. Earlier 2-position dwarf signals wouldn't have been light signals and would have just had marker colors printed on them. Later models would have gained lights, which would have made them identical to 3-position dwarf signals. When a 2-position dwarf signal is set to proceed, it's only an indication that the points are set for movement, but the tracks can still be occupied, which is a contrary to 3-position dwarf signals, which only show proceed when the line up ahead is clear. An example of a dwarf signal being used is at Kensington. The crossover here is a single slip, so trains exiting the grain sidings would have to shunt onto the down line, and then go back over the crossover to proceed onto the up line. A dwarf signal is placed before the crossover on the siding to show the driver it's safe to proceed, and also just before the crossover on the down line. Disc signals. Disc signals are similar to both dwarf and calling on signals, where they control movement from sidings to the main line and to wrong line moves. In fact, they are literally the same as dwarf signals and do the same job. The only difference is that disc signals can be positioned on signal posts and can have signal posts to themselves. They are similar to calling on signals, as they also protect movement, but discs protect sidings and the main line, rather than the main line only. The 2 aspects discs show are stop, with the red disc facing the line, and a red or purple light being illuminated, and proceed, with the signal turned 90 degrees, and the disc not facing the main line, and a green light lit. Interestingly, on signaling diagrams, a disc signal going towards the next signal is labeled as towards the next signal, while regular home signals are labeled as to the next signal. And I'll go through how disc signals actually work in a little more clear detail. They are similar to calling ons, however, disc signals do not refer to the specific track which they are under. They can refer to multiple tracks, and they also do not imply that the track up ahead is clear, similar to calling ons. They only imply that you can go towards the next signal, however, the track may not be clear. When a disc is referring to multiple lines, point indicators are used, which were usually a green and red box. However, they can also be arrows. The green and red box were rotated to show different directions the points were set to, with green facing the same direction the points are set to. There are a lot more point indicators, which I won't mention here. That was pretty much all the signals involved in 2-position semaphore signaling. While there is a thing called upper quadrant 3-position semaphore signaling, I will not be discussing that form of signaling here. But don't click off yet, because we still have Safeworking to cover, which, aside from signals, is probably the most important element of infrastructure about a railway. I guess after actually having trains. Double line block Safeworking. Now, I'm going to be covering two forms of Safeworking that were commonly used on the Victorian railway network. And in fact, both of these forms of Safeworking, despite being 19th century technology, made it well into the 21st century. The main objective of Safeworking was to prevent multiple trains from going onto the same block, or otherwise known as the same distance between signal boxes. In the double line block system, you would have a wooden box called a block instrument, equipped with levers, bells, and dials, which, using the power of the telegraph, the signalers would send messages to each other to see if it was safe to send the train through. They are placed in signal boxes, and they are usually two unless it's the end of the double line block. One is for the signal box up, and one is for the next signal box down. Now, the block instrument is a collection of 6 individual instruments, 2 dials. The left dial has a red needle, and if swung to the right, the line is clear, and if swung to the left, the line was occupied. And the dial on the right has a black needle and showed if trains were departing the signal box. If no train was departing, the needle would be swung to the left, and if the line was occupied, it would be swung to the right. 1 plunger and 1 bell. Both of these go hand in hand, and when the plunger is fully pushed, the bell on the receiving end will sound. 1 black button. When this is pressed, the black needle will reset to clear. And last but not least, 1 switch handle. It has 2 positions, on and off. These correspond to the line being clear and being occupied. The normal position of the lever is off, but when the signaler needs to send a message asking if the line is clear, it's switched on, and it must be kept on. However, it must be switched off when sending other messages. It must be placed off prior to the train arrival signal or cancelling signal, as since the block is now clear, so the lever is switched off. There are several codes that the signalers use to communicate with each other, distinguished by the amount and the time between the bells sounding, like a sort of Morse code for signalers, and here's the list. To get the attention of the receiving signaler, the bell sounds once. To ask if the line is clear, the bell sounds 4 times consecutively. When the train departs the current signal box, the bell sounds twice consecutively. When the train arrives at the signal box, the previous signal box's bell will be sounded 3 times consecutively. This can also mean an obstruction is removed. To say that there is an obstruction, the bell is sounded 6 times consecutively. To say that the line is clear, but the junction or the station is blocked, the bell is sounded 6 times, with a pause between the first and second beat. To signal that the train needs to be stopped and examined, the bell is rung 7 times consecutively. If the signaler didn't hear the last message, the bell is rung 4 times, with a pause between the second and third beat. To cancel the line clear signal, then the bell is rung 8 times, with a pause between the third and fourth beat. And finally, if a custom message needs to be sent out via the telephone, the bell is rung 3 times, with a pause between the second and third beat. The call attention bell must always be sent before line clear but junction block, cancel line clear, and telephone signal. There are a couple of other combinations which are used to distinguish between the train types: goods, livestock, passenger, and etc. But I won't cover them in this video as it's already pretty long, and they aren't too important. Let's look at how the double line block system would work in real life. Let's say you're a signalman working at Riddles Creek, and you're in cahoots with the next signal box up the line, Clarkfield. If no trains to depart Riddles Creek, then the black needle should be at clear with the lever off. A train at Riddles Creek departs the yard and waits at the starting signal. Riddles Creek sends a call attention, and also the train type to Clarkfield. If Clarkfield is responsive, then it should reply with a call attention back. Riddles Creek sends, "Is the line clear?" To which, if the line is clear, Clarkfield will set the lever to on and will reply with the train type back. Riddles Creek will then hold the black button and press the plunger to set the black needle to occupied. And the red needle at Clarkfield will also be set to occupied or online. Riddles Creek then will set the points and the signals, and the train departs. Once the train departs Riddles Creek will send train departure to Clarkfield, and Clarkfield will acknowledge that they have received the message and send back the same train departure. All signals at Riddles Creek must be set to stop until the train arrival message is sent from Clarkfield. Once the train has arrived at Clarkfield, passing the home signal and another 400 meters for safety, the signalman will look out for the white tail disc or red lamp to ensure the train hasn't come apart, and if it hasn't, the lever is placed off, and Clarkfield sends Riddles Creek train arrival. Riddles Creek responds by also setting the lever to off, mirroring Clarkfield's train arrival, while holding the black button, setting the line back to clear, and so on for the next signal box or next train. The next form of safe working, staff and ticket safe working. Staff and ticket safe working. Staff and ticket safe working is widely used on single track and less busy lines. And just like double line block, the main purpose of staff and ticket is to prevent multiple trains to go on the same line at the same time. Standard staff and ticket works by having a metal rod with the names of the section engraved on it. This is known as the staff. When a train departs, the signaler will hand the driver the staff, and the driver is allowed to continue until the next staffed station, where the staff will be exchanged for the next section, and so on. The way staffs are exchanged is the driver will deposit the staff for the previous section, and a large hoop will usually be attached to the staff for the next section, to allow for an easier non-stop exchange. The station master, signalman, or person in charge will then deposit the staff into the staff exchange box, a wooden box, and it can be exchanged out when a train comes down from the other end. Each section of staff and ticket has a different colored box. When the staff is exchanged, it can be used to unlock the staff exchange box. Once the staff exchange box is open, inside the signaler will find a book of tickets. Not only will the signalman write a physical paper ticket for the driver saying that he can depart, the signalman will also telephone the next section with a series of codes. The codes which are used for line operation are APIX, a shortened version of train left here at, and ARCA, a shortened version of train has arrived here at. And how these messages would look like is to the next section, train number 32, APIX, and the time. When the train arrives at the next section, the current signaler would send to the previous section, train number 32, ARCA, and then their signature. A code must always be sent unless instructed otherwise, or the telephone line is down. If two trains are looking to go the same direction in relatively short intervals, then they can both proceed with one staff. The signalman will just tell driver of the first train that the staff will be taken by the next train, and usually the driver of the first train will touch the staff, and then it will be handed to the driver of the second train. When the telephone fails, trains are not permitted to follow each other in intervals less than the running time of the section, carrying the staff of course. The other codes besides train arrived and then train departed all apply to when a train needs to shunt outside the home signal and onto the single line. Shunting is not allowed to take place outside the home signal at staff locations, without the driver possessing the staff. When a train is about to shunt onto the single line, the signalman will send the code AGNI to the previous signal box to ask if the line is clear for a shunt. And if the train is allowed to shunt, the previous signal box will send back the code AUDI. When the shunt is complete, the current signaler will send a WAC, signifying the line is now clear and trains are allowed to continue. There is one more code, and that's a mass, when a master key is in use, which I won't cover. Let's look at what regular trains do on staff and ticket. You're a signaler back in 2013, and you're the Diamond Creek signaler. An X-Trap enters the station, you collect the staff for the previous section, place the staff in the staff exchange box, it opens up, and you write the driver a ticket and hand over the staff for the next section. You send the Eltham signaler ARCA. When the train departs, you send the Hurstbridge signaler APIX, and now the section is occupied, and no train is allowed to continue until the staff is brought back down. Thanks for watching, guys. It's been quite a long one. While there are similarities to the old mechanical stuff and what we use today, it's vastly different, and it's interesting to see how our trains were controlled over 50 years ago. The last mechanical signal in passenger operation was the Wallen distance signal, which was decommissioned and removed in early 2021. While not as frequent on the freight network as they once were, they are still kinda common, such as this bracket one at Barnes. The last bit of staff and ticket used on the Metropolitan network was from Eltham to Hurstbridge, which was removed in 2013. And the last use of double line block anywhere on the Victorian rail network was from Craigieburn to Seymour, and that was decommissioned in October of 2023. Thank you for watching.